Call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Meeting of the Santa Cruz Local Agency Formation Commission. I'll ask Executive Officer Serrano for a roll call.
Chair, I'll defer to our analyst to do the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Officer. Commissioner Jim Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Roger Anderson.
Present.
Commissioner Justin Cummings.
Here.
Vice Chair Manu Koning.
Here.
Commissioner Rochelle Lather. Absent. Commissioner Eduardo Montesino. Absent. Commissioner Alan Timms.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Ed Banks.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Zach Friend. Not present. Chair John Hunt.
Here.
And alternate Commissioner Fred Keeley is not here. And that concludes roll call, Mr. Executive Officer.
Thank you.
Chair, I will note that we do have a quorum, and since Commissioner Lather is not here, alternate Commissioner Ed Banks will be our voting member.
Thank you. I'll ask the Executive Officer for any message you have for us.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, we are conducting this meeting under a hybrid model. This allows members of the public to join us either virtually or in person. Commissioners will be attending in person unless they meet the criteria under state law regarding hybrid meetings. Our legal counsel is joining us virtually, so he is available if we have any questions for him. For members of the public who would like to speak to the commission on any agenda item, they have up to 3 minutes. We will inform them when they have 1 minute left and when their time is up. For those here in person, we ask you to go to the podium and state your name. For those joining us via Zoom, if you click on the reactions button and click raise hand, we'll then acknowledge you and you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. For anyone joining us via conference call, if you press *9, that will raise your hand. Chair, that concludes my brief summary of the hybrid model. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Morning. Good morning. Okay, the next item is adoption of the minutes. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments on the minutes?
I'll move approval.
Second. Approval moved by Commissioner Timms, seconded by Commissioner Koenig. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are approved. Thank you. This is an opportunity for public comment on any items not on the agenda. Please.
Is it on? No, it is. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for your public service. My name is Becky Steinbrunner. I live in the rural Aptos Hills area. I have spoken to you before about the reorganization of Scotts Valley Fire and Branciforte Fire. The last time I was here, I informed you that Scotts Valley Fire District Board of Directors had voted to drop the insurance for the Branciforte Fire Station that is now shuttered as a cost-saving measure. I'm still very concerned about that. It does still hold liability insurance, so they are able to meet there, to have public meetings there. But if the building were destroyed or damaged, it was said publicly at the board meeting that it would they would go to the people of Happy Valley, the former Branciforte Fire District, to gather money to repair it or restore it. That worries me. The other issue regarding the Scotts Valley Fire and Branciforte Fire reorganization is that I have asked that the Scotts Valley Board move to transition from at-large board elections to district-based elections based on the precedent of the fine example of the Central Fire and Aptos La Salva Fire consolidation. That met with some resistance, but I'm happy to say that the board did set aside $30,000 for that purpose to hire a demographer. I was at first concerned about that it wouldn't be enough based on the numbers that were reported publicly when Central Fire was making this type of action. But having done more research, I believe that it will be sufficient. And I am confident that the board will see it through to transition to district-based elections and not just do the demographer study and stop. I will be attending their meetings to monitor that. It is an important issue. The last thing I want to ask is about consolidating water districts in our county. I think it is a timely and prudent thing to consider consolidation of Soquel Creek Water District with the City of Santa Cruz Water Department. I know that Ms. Perrette Harmon is on board with your commission as a water expert. And I feel that regional planning is in process. I know that through a water optimization analysis that is forthcoming. But the City of Santa Cruz is doing a phenomenal job of upgrading their equipment and treatment facilities to be able to take more water during wet years, and they could indeed share that with Soquel Creek Water District. Soquel Creek Water District could stop pumping. Soquel Creek Water District has invested in a very expensive technology and energy dependent project, the Pure Water Soquel project, which is now due to come online March 15th of next year with anticipated operating costs annually of $6.5 million.
Ms. Becky, your time is up.
All right, thank you. I think it's time to look at consolidation, and I hope that your commission will consider that if it comes forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any requests for comment online?
No, Chair, we don't have any requests at this time.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is a special presentation on the Central Fire District, life after consolidation. Thank you very much for coming and for putting this presentation together for us.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, before you start, I'll introduce you and kind of give a reason why we're doing this. So this commission has accomplished a lot in the last 5 years. We were able to record and finalize up to 28 different changes of organizations within this 5-year cycle. And some of them were very significant, whether it was a fire consolidation that we're going to learn more about today, or a sphere annexation with the water district, dissolutions, or other types of reorganizations. Your staff and the commission spent years working on these projects, and then we accomplish them, and then we just shift and focus our attention to something else or another project or another concern. But it always curious of like, what has happened since that significant project that we spent all that time? And we just assume everything's going well, and that's the intent. But it'd be great if we learned about, what has happened, what are lessons learned, what's going well, where are areas of improvement, so that we can learn from those success stories and apply them to upcoming projects. So that's why your staff is introducing a new series. I like to call it the LAFCO original series, Life After. So we're going to be bringing past changes of organization to the commission to learn about what has happened since that has been completed. So today we're going to learn about life after consolidation. So we invited Chief Nee to provide us an update. And with that, Chief, if you can help welcome Chief Nee to the meeting today. So thank you very much.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Executive Officer Serrano and Chair Hunt and commissioners. My name is Jason Nee. I'm the Fire Chief of Central Fire. I started my career at Central Fire in 1999. I've been the fire chief since 2022. And in that time, I had the pleasant experience of going through the consolidation between Aptos and Central Fire. And one of the things that I want to point out today is that this commission put a bunch of time in 2020 and 2021 to get this organization to where it is today, and we appreciate that. And there will be some lessons learned that we can reflect back on for future potential consolidations. And I also want to reserve time at the end for any questions, but if you do have questions in the midst of my discussion, please go ahead and raise your hand or flag me because I can talk a lot. Next slide, please. So here's just a quick history of some consolidations within the county. These are fire consolidations. One of the things that I will point out is Central Fire is historically 5 former volunteer fire agencies that have over time, because of population growth, call volume growth, we've had to become a professional fire service in lieu of the historic volunteer fire agency. And so you can see the most recent consolidation, which Ms. Steinbruner talked about, was the Brents 40 Scotts Valley consolidation. And I'll just point out that up and down the state, that in the fire service, that this is becoming more and more the norm. And so we don't need to be afraid of it. There are challenges along the way, obviously, but this is essentially what is happening throughout the state as a result of increasing costs of doing business. When you look at the raise in costs in apparatus, equipment, facilities, personnel costs, workers' comp costs, pension costs, all of those things are forcing organizations to relook at what the future might look like so that we can continue to provide this service for the next 30 years and beyond. Thank you. So Central Fire District, we serve Capitola, Live Oak, Soquel, Rio Del Mar, Aptos, and La Selva Beach. We have seven stations, about 130 members. We serve about 70,000 people, 35,000 parcels within our district. Most of our revenue is generated from the tax increments. So public taxes, property taxes pay our revenue as well. And we have 5 elected officials and their 4-year terms, and those terms rotate. Next slide, please. As Ms. Steinbruner pointed out, upon consolidation in 2021, the organization started going down the path of redistricting. So instead of at large, we went to a district program, and you can see on the slide, we just took on 3 new board members for 2026. So their next election will be 2028. And that's how the district is broken out to get essentially an equal volume of people, electorate in each geographic area. And so that's the way that lined out. We've got five board members and 5 districts. Next slide, please. So what are some of the things that we've accomplished since consolidation? And I will say that it hasn't been all lollipops and unicorns the entire time. There's been a ton of work involved, both with the administrative staff level and the line staff, the labor groups, to get us to where we are today. So one of the first things we did, so we went from 2 legacy organizations and we became one. And what we needed to figure out first was what is the goal? Like, what are we trying to get to? What is the long-term plan for us? And so we developed with a third-party firm to help us figure out what our master plan is. And that master plan is going to help us provide goals for the future. For the next 20 years, what are the things we're trying to do to make sure that we can continue to provide this service? Part of that was also establishing a strategic plan. The strategic plan is the 5-year chunks. So in the next 5 years, how are we going to start chipping away at this giant elephant that we need to eat, which is the master plan? So based on and armed with that information of those 2 documents, the organization was able to figure out, hey, one of the things we need to do, we've got facilities, we've got equipment problems, we've got facilities that are in flood zones. We need to make moves in the future. And how are we going to be able to afford that? And those plans allowed us to present to our board in November for the November election a general obligation bond for facilities and equipment improvements. And so that's kind of one of the next steps that the organization has gone through as a result of our planning process. And we started that planning process almost immediately after the consolidation. We received the master and strategic plan in 2022, and we've been working on the general obligation bond since then. So that'll go to the voters, Measure R, in November. Also, we've developed a capital improvement plan. And basically what that does is we identify the large capital purchases that the organization is going to have to need in the next 10. We have it scheduled out for the next 20 years, but just kind of looking at 10-year chunks in a row. Because the cost of apparatus, so each fire engine that you see driving around out on the street today, was probably purchased for between $300,000 and $500,000 when it was purchased. The price of those apparatus today are over $1 million. So the rate of increase of our ability to provide the service is increasing drastically, and we have to make amendments in our budget on an annual basis to provide a capital improvement plan so that we don't have to borrow money every time that we need to replace apparatus. We've also had some improvements to some of our fleet facilities. Our fleet facility provides most of the mechanical services for the fire agencies within this county and some in Monterey County. We had some significant work to do there. And probably one of the biggest pieces was getting two organizations onto the same policy and standard operating procedure. That was a huge administrative lift, and taking two legacy organizations that have a deep-seated culture and history and getting them onto one policy manual was quite a task. We have enhanced some staffing in the community risk reduction as well as our training division. And there have been budget efficiencies by eliminating redundant positions. And I'll describe that as we used to have two boards of elected officials, two fire chiefs, two fire marshals, two general counsels, two IT departments, et cetera. When we consolidated, we were able to consolidate to one general counsel and one fire board and one IT department, et cetera. Some of those were already shared, but instead of paying two bills, now we're just paying one. So there's some low-hanging fruit in all consolidations that can be accomplished in the same manner. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the quick hitters. Some of these we already talked about, the voting rights piece. One of probably the biggest thing for me, but it's hard to really quantify, is the next piece called coverage. And essentially to break it down for this group, if there's a structure fire in Central Fire, we have 7 stations. We take 5 of those stations and we empty them, and we go to the incident, whatever that incident is, because they're really staffing heavy incidents at the very beginning. And that leaves us 2 fire engines, basically, for lack of a better term, 2 pieces of equipment to cover the rest of the district. So we can supply a full complement of we call it a first alarm equipment to an incident of our own people with our own training, using our terminology to an incident, and still have 2 pieces of equipment to move throughout the district to provide coverage. And not every call is a structure fire. Sometimes it's a vehicle accident. It only takes 3 pieces of equipment, but we have the ability to move within our district, kind of this nebulous piece that our people have become really adept at, of moving to cover the population base. So that piece, it's hard to tangibly put a number to that, but that's been a very virtuous piece that we've improved upon without bothering our neighbors at the city of Santa Cruz or the city of Watsonville too much. Increased unit hours. So there was some redundancy in a little bit of the staffing, the line staffing, and we were able to increase in January this year. We put an extra piece of equipment on the street, which is, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's the first time in the last 40 years that we've ever increased our staffing. And so this model is a trial right now, but all the feedback so far is that it's been positive. So we have, instead of sending a giant fire engine or a ladder truck to, let's just call it a medical aid for lack of a better term, we can send a smaller, more nimble piece of equipment with only 2 people on it. We've achieved that through our consolidation for having the extra people. Policy and SOPs. Expectations is one of the things that I think was really critical to the success of the consolidation. When you have 2, like I talked about before, 2 long-term organizations, getting expectations on getting everybody on the same page is really a challenging piece. And I'll give credit to our labor group that was very invested in having the same nomenclature, the same command and control procedures. It was a very heavy lift, but it's been a really good model for us, and it's really helped the culture within the organization having that all the same. Purchasing power, it kind of goes without saying that if you're going to buy more apparatus or more radios or more whatever, the more you buy, the cheaper the unit price will be. We saw this almost immediately when we consolidated. If each legacy organization were to buy radios for their historic organization, the price was going to be X, but once we consolidated, the price was Y, and immediately off the bat, we saved over $150,000 on portable radios for just a single purchase alone. Cost saving services and supplies, like I talked about before, general counsel, we only have one. IT services, we only have one, et cetera, et cetera. Remove staffing redundancy. So kind of in the same vein, we used to have 2 fire chiefs. Now we just have 1 fire chief. We used to have 2 training chiefs. Now we just have 1 chief. So there's redundancies that we were able to eliminate or reassign to another position within the organization, and nobody lost their jobs. We just, through attrition and through promotion, we were able to adjust our staffing. And then through the consolidation, kind of 2 of the bigger things were expanding our training division and DSI stands for Defensible Space Inspector. So we've got a lot of wildland urban interface area within our district. We were able to essentially, one legacy organization had a strong history in defensible space inspections, another legacy agency didn't. When we combined, we were able to take the forces of both of those organizations and apply them so that we can supply those folks out into the wildland urban interface, which has been a fantastic program for our organization and for the constituents. And then training, same basic idea. One legacy organization each had training staff. Once we combine them, and now we're able to provide effective, robust training for our staff. That has been something that, quite honestly, in the incipiency, I didn't see that as one of the real benefits, but our line staff are better prepared today as a result of the consolidation than they were prior as separate organizations. And then lastly, capital reserves. So like I talked about before, we've got a capital financing plan. It goes out 20 years. We're adjusting that annually just based on the increased cost of doing business, purchasing large scale apparatus. Historically, one of the organizations had kind of had a plan. The other organization had no plan. They would spend out of the operating budget. As a result of consolidation, we've been setting aside money every single year so that in 20, 30 years from now, when we need to replace apparatus, we have sufficient funds available to us to make those purchases. Next slide, please. Okay, so lessons learned. So when we entered into the consolidation process, utilizing the help of LAFCO, one of the things we did with Aptos and Central Fire was we did a consolidation feasibility study. And that feasibility study provided us a bunch of data. Like, here's how much the combined budget will be. Here's what the staffing profile would look like. Here's what the command team would look like. All that data. And all that data is based on assumptions. And those assumptions are based on the past. And what we found, looking back at the data that was provided, and let's not forget, this started in 2018, the feasibility study. Consolidation finished in 2021. In the midst of that was CZU and COVID. And so all of those assumptions were essentially turned on their head. And so looking back at those assumptions, great assumptions, but there's inaccuracies in all of that. And what I want to point out is when you get these consolidation feasibility studies, that's just our best guess of what it's going to look like. It's not going to be the way it was. I've looked back at the estimated budget for the district based on the consolidation feasibility study and what the real budget was, what the final budget was at the end of the fiscal year. And they vary. They're different in some years, $6 million delta, in other years, $8 million. And so you just don't know what the future holds. You're just taking your best guess when you're reading in these consolidation feasibility studies. But really the consolidation was successful because leadership within the labor groups, the elected officials, the fire chiefs, and then obviously the community. The community was very much in favor of the consolidation. As a matter of fact, at our, I forget what you call it, Joe, the protest period.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you. There were 0 protests against the and it covers a lot of people. A lot of people could have come to this board and said, like, we're not in favor of this. We want to keep our local organization. There were 0 protests, and we really appreciate that piece. And then the other thing I'll reiterate is that these processes take a lot of time. Our feasibility study was completed in 2018. The consolidation wasn't finalized by this board until 2021. So there's a lot of stuff to iron out and a lot of challenges to overcome along the way. And then the last piece is sometimes you got to play the long game on these things. You either have labor groups or fire chiefs or electeds or community members that are not in favor of it and are very vocal about it. But sometimes you just have to be patient to make sure that these things will work out, or people term out or retire. Next slide, please. One of the things that I think our organizations did really well when we consolidated was we were very transparent. LAFCO was very helpful in this. We had community meetings. We took input from the public. We weren't trying to hide anything. And I think that was an impressive key for our success. And really what I found throughout the process was that there were 4 key things that you need to answer before you start going into having community meetings, because these are the types of things that the labor groups are going to be interested in. These are the type of things that the community is going to be interested in, and as well as the staff. The staff want to make sure that their jobs are secure, obviously. And people are really worried about what's going to happen to the firefighter. So you're going to want to have answers for all of these things when you're going through the process. And I will just point out point number 3 there, who will govern. One of the pitfalls that we ran into is our timeline got pushed back a little bit in the calendar year. The consolidation was completed in February as opposed to in December, and that caused a little bit of awkwardness with board members who were essentially filling the role from January and February on either board. When the board dissolved and became its current iteration, there was a little bit of awkwardness in there. So timing does matter, and who governs kind of does matter as well, especially people might feel like there's going to be a lack of representation as a result of consolidation. So who those people are in the room really makes a big difference kind of in the end when it's all shaken out. Next slide. Oh, and with that, that's the end of my slides. And I'm happy to take any questions from the commissioners or staff.
Thank you very much. Let's ask if are any questions from the public, and then we'll move to the commissioners. Ms. Steinbrunner?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrunner. I appreciate your coming, Chief Nee, and talking about this, because it's always hindsight that you learn from, isn't it? So thank you. I was involved in I'm technically not in Central Fire Protection District, but they provide service to my community. Excellent service, I may add. So I did become very involved in it, just out of interest and concern. So I think what I would like to hear is a discussion of the workload that transition caused to the administrative and the finance department. I know it was substantial. And at one point, the bookkeeper, now reduced to 1, had to keep 2 sets of separate books for at least a year. And the workload was tremendous. I remember Chief Walbridge saying if he asked Ms. Denhauser to do one more thing, she would probably scream. And I know that has been a similar issue with the Scotts Valley and Branciforte reorganization. Tremendous workload put on the administrative staff in the transition part. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration so that when other annexations, consolidations happen, that is accounted for, to not overstress the remaining consolidated administrator financial staff. I remember in the consolidation too with Central Fire and Aptos La Selva, there was a big disparity between benefits and pay. And that had to be worked out actually legislatively. And so I think, thank you. So I think that needs to be discussed too. Not only that, but also the culture of the 2 agencies was different, and that had to be worked out, but has been done very well. What I think was helpful to see that consolidation over the finish line Because as you may remember, both fire chiefs quit. They left, and I don't know why, but they left. And so new chiefs came in, and Don Jarvis took the helm of Aptos de Selva. He is now the commission's expert on fire districts consolidation matters, and he really took the reins and saw it across the finish line. And I do remember the uncomfortable issue of when those two Aptos de Selva fire directors had to be just shown the door. It was very uncomfortable. So timing is very important.
Time's up, Ms. Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions from the audience here? Are there any online?
No, sir.
I'll open it up to the commissioners. Eduardo?
Yes, I got a few questions. One I would touch on, because and Cyber also brought it up, is culture. How did it work out? You know, because you're both basically doing the same job, but the culture is different.
Yeah, it's a really great point that Ms. Steinbrenner brings up. And then also for you, Commissioner, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that the blending of the cultures has been easy. Like, there has been challenges, right? Like, the expectations for organization A and organization B, they're always going to be different because, it's the first learned, best learned. Like, well, this is just how we do it in this fire station. That is super hard. I will give credit to our staff is that they have blended very, very well. And quite frankly, I thought that the culture piece was going to be one of the last sticking pieces, because some of the horror stories that I hear throughout the state from other organizations, some organizations have been consolidated effectively for 7 or 8 years, and some people still don't work in either organization. One of the first things that we do the firefighters get to choose what station they want to work at. Based on seniority, and they essentially bid for the open spot. And one of the very first things we did to kind of blend that gap and the cultural differences, we tore off the Band-Aid, said you could bid wherever you want to go within the organization, either your legacy organization or the other organization, and that really helped make that change. And surprisingly, about 60% of the staff switched from where they were in their legacy organization into the newer organization. So it hasn't always been easy. I will admit that. But it's never going to be easy, especially when you're talking about something as nebulous as culture and kind of what that expectation is. But 3 years into it now, I'd say we're actually doing very well with that piece. But that is definitely something to be considered, whether it's a school district, a water district, a fire district, that piece is always going to be there. Absolutely.
And you talked about coverage and how you've been able to manage that, but what about response times?
Yeah, so none of the locations of any of the facilities moved. They all remained in their legacy organization location. And that's really a function of finances, right? Like, how are we going to buy money and then build another station to augment that? That's part of the master plan. But the responses essentially remain the same or slightly improved over the last year because we added additional unit hours to the street. So we've got, instead of 7 pieces of equipment now, we have 8 pieces of equipment on the street. And so that is reducing our response times slightly. And I say slightly because our total number of responses is around 9,000 incidents a year. When we started this consolidation feasibility stuff, it was around 7,000 calls a year. So now we're up a couple thousand calls a year, and we're still meeting very, very good response times.
Great. On this small equipment response, or what I forget what you called it, a pilot program. How's that worked out? Because I represent the city of Watsonville, and that's always been our dream, because a lot of our calls are in the senior community, and it's mostly medical. I mean, the overwhelming of calls are medical equipment.
Yeah. So it's a simple question. It's a very nuanced answer.
We'll talk later, but
yeah, no. So the overall piece is it's been an improvement for our constituents. It's been an improvement for our staff because, so the way the fire service works out is you've got a supervisor on each piece of equipment. That supervisor is called a captain. That captain's responsible for the day-to-day workings of the crew, and then coordinating all the daily stuff. we put two non-captains, two firefighters on that piece. It's like a F-550 with a little bit of water on it and some tools and medical equipment, to your point. Because that's basically 70% of what the fire service is doing today is in the medical field. And so that has provided a couple of things. Number one is taking the workload off of our ladder truck, which costs us about $2 million if we were to replace it today. So it's taking the miles and the wear and tear off of that piece of equipment. Number two, it's providing a training opportunity for those folks that aren't supervisors, aren't captains, and they have an opportunity to manage kind of their own day. They still have a supervisor back at the station, but when they're going to incidents, they're the ones managing it. And they're equipped to say like, hey, we need more help or whatever the situation is, but it's providing a training opportunity for those folks as well. Now, how we got there, I will say has not always been easy, but I'll provide credit to our labor group that was very helpful in recognizing and seeing this vision of, yeah, we probably shouldn't put all the miles for somebody that took a fall on the $2 million piece of equipment. It's probably more reasonable to send two firefighters to do that job. And what we see in the state is everybody's basically coming to the same recognition, like the cost of business to have these huge pieces of equipment driving around the street versus the ability to be more nimble in your response. Like I know Sac Metro, for example, it's a big fire organization in Sacramento area. They're putting some firefighters just like this, but in like Subaru Outbacks or something like some other iteration of a smaller vehicle to do essentially the same thing that we're talking about. Was there another question there,
No,
Commissioner?
because that was it. But has it provided a better response times versus saying, sending a big old truck,
Yes. So we have it strategically located. We have that piece of equipment strategically located next to the wildland urban interface. So areas where you wouldn't take that ladder truck anyway, that smaller vehicle can get to. It has improved response times because getting a ladder truck out of the station and to the incident takes a lot longer than a small 550 pickup truck, basically. And it has improved response times in that there's more unit hours on the street.
Thank you.
Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation and also for your leadership to this point. I'm frankly amazed that in 3 short years, you're where you're at. I wonder if you could just comment for me on your experience of attrition while the merger was happening in terms of staff, and then how that's been since, more recently in terms of recruitment and how that's gone now that you're one larger organization.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I'll start with kind of the recruitment piece, kind of at the larger level, and then I'll kind of boil it down to how that affected us during the consolidation. So on the larger level, recruitment in the fire service is down, way down. When I was starting and Chief Odie were starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was so competitive to get a fire job. And we would have thousands of people applying for these positions. And today, if you get tens of people applying for these positions, you're pretty happy about it. So the pool of candidates has diminished greatly throughout over the last 20 years, let's say. And then how did attrition work in our organization? Yeah, it was interesting. There were some folks that were like really tied to their legacy organization. And once the word was coming that this consolidation was happening, like a handful of folks put in for retirement before the consolidation or immediately afterwards. They were just happy with their host organization, and that's fine. But there have been, we probably have people leave, probably 4 or 5 people a year just for the service retirements or injuries. I'd say that's probably the clip that we've been going at. The interesting thing about when we had this attritional piece at the time of consolidation is it provided opportunities for folks that weren't in leadership positions to move up within the organization and to be reassigned to another assignment. Because, quite frankly, when you're doing these cultural changes and these large, significant organizational changes, it's hard to take somebody that's been doing something for 15 years and move them to another spot. Now, if you have somebody who's brand new in that position and you move them to a new spot, it's a little easier on the soul. So we did benefit from that in a couple of instances. As Ms. Steinbruner pointed out, both fire chiefs essentially retired at the same time. And so we were left with a bunch of positions to fill in the immediacy. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, yes, thank you.
Supervisor Koenig?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Need, for the great presentation today. It seems obvious that the consolidation has really been a boon to the organization and put you on really solid financial footing. While I'm not looking at your balance sheet every day, I can say what I do see regularly throughout my day job is just how present you guys are out in the community. I think your reputation is well deserved. You get out there, you're at all the Firewise events, working with the Fire Safe Council, and I know that that's really ultimately helped us to increase the number of Firewise communities throughout the county. I mean, really fivefold since the CZU fire. You guys have played a big role in that, and yeah, your good reputation in the community is well deserved, and I just appreciate that. We're going to be talking about the reorganization of county fire a little bit later in this meeting. I'm just curious what if you have any major takeaways. Maybe it's about how your relationship with county fire has evolved through the merger, or how you see it being potentially improved through reorganization, or anything else that we should keep in mind as we consider further fire reorganizations in the county in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start with our Central Fire's relationship with County Fire and the contract agency CAL FIRE. That relationship has been improving over the last probably 4 or 5 years as a result of the leadership for CAL FIRE and Central Fire. And I would say that the kind of the takeaway for potential CSA 48 and however that piece is going to go is, from my perspective, the thing that you want to look at first and address and make sure that you're meeting the need is, are you providing the service necessary for the community? So, for example, in Pajaro Valley's case, they're down to 2-person staffing, whereas they had been at 3-person staffing. And so for us in the fire service, it might not seem like a huge difference to this body or to the general public, but that is a huge significant difference. And if you can increase your staffing by 1 member per day, that is a huge improvement for your ability to provide a safe environment for those folks and the constituency as well. So that's kind of where I would focus initially is to make sure that whatever service that you're able to provide, that you could provide it across the board, and it's either improvement or not getting worse than where it was when you started. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments, Roger?
Yeah, I greatly enjoyed your presentation. And I'm wondering if you have any extra time that you could provide sort of an annotated version of it. Because I think it could be quite useful both for this commission and perhaps for many of your other colleagues around the state.
Oh, around the state, yeah. Yeah, I can look into that, Commissioner. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair, if there's not other questions, just one of the things that Ms. Steinbruner did bring up that I will point out was kind of that finance piece, and I'll kind of pull the curtain back a little bit. And our poor finance administrator, Ms. Danhauser. So I talked with the consolidation completed in February of 21. That's in the midst of the fiscal years. And so, talking about timing again, Ms. Danhauser and her staff, she's got 2 other folks that work for her, essentially had to keep 2 books, one for Aptos La Selva, one for Central Fire, post-consolidation in February, and then up to the new fiscal year, complete the audited financial reports separate. And then in 2022 fiscal year, we were able to finally have a single budget. So that is just another consideration for future development and reorganizations, is that, that is a huge lift for staff, not only for administrators like myself, but for the finance folks to have to keep 2 books for a period of time, get through the financial audit. Like, that is a very clear piece that Ms. Steinbrenner has asked me just personally not to ever have to do that again. But it's just a huge lift for them, and quite frankly, they did a fantastic job. They have a fantastic staff that did that part, and they made it through it. Not completely unscathed, but they did make it through it. So it was an excellent point to bring up.
I've got one question. In terms of community outcomes, you mentioned response times, and I know you've probably got a number of performance evaluation indicators, perhaps, incident outcomes, or are those collected and reported in a regular way? And I think it'd be interesting for this commission to look at changes in the performance before and after the consolidation, if those bits of information are available. What types of things do you collect to see how well the fire department's doing?
Chair, that's an excellent question. One of the things that we do on a quarterly basis within our own organization is we report on the number of incidents. We call it turnout time, like how long did it take to get out of the station? What was the total response time? And there's a lot of factors included in that, like how long did the 911 call take? How long was the 911 call processing time? What was the turnout time? What was the response time? And then what was the time on task? How long was that unit on that incident and affecting aid? So we report quarterly. Probably the next one will be September, October, I would suggest. Probably October. And I can make that data available to you, to this group if you want. One of the things that I will point out, part of our master plan, we were collecting data, and we were looking at the last 5 years, and really COVID put a real challenge on being able to pull that data out and say, like, this is effective data, because the volume was a third of what it had normally been prior to COVID. And then it subsequently rebounded, obviously, but at the time, it wasn't great data to look at in the early 2020s. So, but yes, we report out quarterly on that. I could make it available to Executive Officer Serrano to share our last few quarterly reports if that's of interest. And one of the things that I will say that you probably will find in there is not only is our call volume increase in the Mid-County area, but as I'm sure you're all painfully aware, so too has the traffic. And that function is also gathered in that, essentially that response time, that from the time they leave the station until the time they arrive on the scene. If you're heading southbound, we all know this, if you're heading southbound between 3 and 6 o'clock, that response time is going to be affected. And that has gotten progressively worse in the last 10 years. So, but to your point, absolutely can make that information available if that's helpful.
Is it available on your website now?
Yeah, it is available on the website. I can't think of the months that we post them on our agendas, but I know we do a quarterly report and it has all of that information on it.
Okay, I think that would be fine. I just, it'd be great to kind of track that as to the point of this presentation, which is how do consolidations affect the community? So, no other questions? Thank you very much.
Chair,
excellent presentation.
I do have 3 quick questions for the chief, if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you. Not to put you on the spot. It's no secret that I love to kind of identify Central Fire as a model, not just for our county, for the state. They have a finance department, an IT department. They have master plans, strategic plans, CIP plans. They have a robust website. They have all that. And I've heard, from certain fire agencies, not just in this county, but they don't like to be compared, right? They're like, that's Central. But what I find fascinating is Central is a result of past consolidations, plural. They are an evolution of 5 separate volunteer departments. So it can be done. These fire departments that are struggling can evolve. And that's what I'm trying to articulate to fire agencies that are distressed, is that you're not losing something, you're gaining something, you're evolving. The ones that evolve are the ones that are sustainable. So my first question for the chief is, what would you say to struggling fire agencies or agencies that are just wary of consolidation or just change in general? How do we help articulate the benefits of it without trying to, because I know it's human nature to be defensive, but how do we get past that hurdle?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. And it comes back to culture. And the two things that the fire service hates most is change and the way things are. So you have to get over that piece first. And, really it boils down to fiefdoms and essentially like, this whole idea of like, we know how to do it best for our local community. But when you're distressed and when there's challenges financially, like we're facing today, and we're not immune to it as a larger organization, we still have 20% increases in workers' comp costs, 30% increases in apparatus costs. All of those same costs are fuel costs, personnel costs, all of those things remain the same. We just have kind of a larger pool to pull from as a result of our 35,000 parcels. So I would say, if the goal is to try to continue to provide service, that same level of service or better for the next 30 years, you have to be open and available to listen to at least the question and answer some of those questions that I posed to this group. And then, because if left to your own devices, eventually your ability to generate revenue is going to outweigh your ability to spend to keep the organization running. And that's just what's happening in the California Fire Service. And it's not just in this county, it's up and down the state. Sonoma County is a fantastic example. They've got 8 consolidations in the last 3 years. And what happens in some of those cases is their revenue gets wiped out because of the campfire, say, and there's no more properties there. And so there's no ability to generate revenue. And so they're looking for an out. And I would suggest that you, like in Aptos and Central's consolidation, neither organization was under duress. They didn't have the pressure of time before failure to find a partner. We found partners before we were under duress. Both agencies were solvent. And that, I think, is one of the key pieces, is do it before you're under pressure of failing, because you lose an ability to negotiate, you lose an ability to get the things that's important to your community. And if you're ahead of it, it's a little less pressure. Did that answer your question?
Yep. Second question. Looking back, you mentioned this wasn't easy, but do you think it was worth it? Was it worth it for the residents? You talked about efficiencies of it, but I just want to kind of get your thoughts of looking back, like, was all this worth it? And the second point of that question is there anything that LAFCO can do to help with future changes of organizations? In this situation, LAFCO was a facilitator. We were also like a resource. Do you think that played a key role in the consolidation? Is there anything else that LAFCO can do to help bridge that discussions with agencies that are either struggling or interested in exploring alternative governance options?
So to your first point about was it worth it? Well, if you ask me, I think it was worth it. If you ask Ms. Danhauser, our finance director, I don't know if she would say it's worth it. But I would say that the long-term sustainability of our organization is stronger today than it was separately. So yes, it was worth it. One. Number two, our ability, like I kind of talked about before, our ability to provide service during drawdown or when we need coverage has improved. And so that for the constituency is a value add that they don't even know is happening. We're doing all of this movement behind the scenes that the public doesn't even know about, and it's to their benefit. To your other point about what can LAFCO do to help, my recollection, Executive Officer, was that LAFCO was very involved in the process that Ms. Steinbruner talked about when there was a discrepancy between and it actually had to do with pensions, and we had to get a state law passed. I forget the name of it now. AB 1170, I think, rings a bell to me, but that could be something totally different. But LAFCO helped make those connections with our state legislatures when we figured out that we have to go to the state to get a law passed so that our pensions could be blended essentially in the CalPERS program. And then subsequently, also LAFCO was very helpful with chipping in a little bit of funds when it came time for consolidation feasibility studies, as well as holding public events for the community to come. And if they were interested to hear about what's actually happening and kind of that transparency piece that I talked about, LAFCO helped us have those community meetings and make sure that we were transparent with the public and that people could see there was nothing nefarious happening behind the scenes. And then really it was the guidance of LAFCO. Once the decision had been made to draw up similar resolutions for the consolidation, it was the guidance of LAFCO that helped push us in that direction. And so that would probably be the third most important piece. Both legacy boards adopting those resolutions provided by the guidance of LAFCO to facilitate the consolidation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Last question, and I'll let you go. Is there any other collaborative opportunities in the future for Central Fire? I see the chief over here in the audience, so.
Oh, that guy. Chief Odie from the city of Santa Cruz. So the city of Santa Cruz had approached Central Fire. It's probably been about a year now. They were going to do a standards of cover assessment of their organization. They had reached out and said, hey, would you guys be interested in a consolidation feasibility study? I said, yeah, be interested in the meeting. We met with city manager Huffaker and some of his staff and the fire chief to talk about kind of the building blocks of not what the agency would look like, but what would the feasibility study look like? And so we did investigate that piece. I will always take a meeting. I think that we have proven as an organization that consolidation in the fire service not only is successful, but it could eventually be the way things are. And then to go through the process of having the feasibility study, so at least you have some of the answers without you don't have to speculate anymore. At least it's there in black and white and everybody can read it, and we'll put it on our webpage, just like we have the 2018 consolidation feasibility study. It's out there. People can ask questions once they read it. If they read it, it's 300 pages long usually. But until you have that study done, you're just speculating. And once you have that study done, you can say like, okay, now we have information to make a decision, yes or no, and maybe it's going to work or maybe it won't, but based on that information only. Otherwise, we're just sitting at the kitchen table throwing darts and guessing. So yes, we're open to it. We see this as the potential future with other local agencies. But I'm not here to put pressure on any one of them. I think if I start showing up at people's meetings, immediately there's going to be like, hold on, what's this guy doing here? He's coming to take over. That is absolutely 100% that's not what I want to be doing. If people have interest in talking to Central Fire about it, I'm happy to engage in those conversations. I honestly think it's just going to be more and more in the future. And I'm happy to take those kinds of requests or inquiries back to our elected so that they can mold the process over.
Thank you, Chief. And that's what I want my commission to hear, and also the public, is that even though Central Fire has this good reputation in the county, they're still looking at ways to improve. They're still looking for ways to evolve. And I feel like that should be kind of the MO for all, not just fire agents, for just special districts, looking for areas to improve, regardless of how well organized you are at the moment. You can always be better. And with that, no further questions for me. So I appreciate it.
We do have a couple more questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Cummings.
First, thanks for the presentation. I've been appreciating all the feedback we've been receiving. And this might be more of a question for LAFCO staff, but I'm just wondering, as we talk about these feasibility studies, considering there's the mergers between different districts, and then, there's and I was going to save this for later because I know we're going to continue this conversation, but whether or not we want to do a merger as a whole county, and whether we can reach out to different districts as we're doing these feasibility studies to see, if Scotts Valley and City of Santa Cruz and Central and all these other districts were interested in creating one large district and then doing one comprehensive overview versus, the one-off studies. I'm just wondering if that's being considered
That's definitely an option for us to consider. In my experience, it's easier to accomplish small success stories. That's something that we can definitely analyze. But the key to the consolidation that we have with Central and Aptos, Branson 40 and Scotts Valley, and other changes of organization is we're able to get people at the table that are willing to explore. If we expand that analysis to include other agencies and other organizations that aren't willing to be at the table at this time, they'll feel forced, like the chief mentioned it. Oh, this is a takeover, and that's not the intent here. We're looking at efficiency. So it would behoove the commission to focus on the ones that are willing to have this discussion and are willing to explore, and that could be used as a stepping stone for another analysis or another study to include other ones after they see the findings, and maybe they were wary at the beginning, but maybe for the next survey or the next study, they're willing to participate. And I think that's a better approach, because then it's not something that what I've learned is a lot of agencies in this county are no longer afraid of LAFCO. They know that LAFCO wants them to succeed. We built that trust. And these studies, we're doing it because we want to work together. And I think if we continue that approach, we'll have other agencies that at some point will want to explore. And I think that we should continue that approach.
Commissioner Montesino?
Yeah, one of the question I think that doesn't get noticed, and I'll just talk for my agency, is because we're our demographics and our budgets. I mean, we're probably one of the lowest paying employee base, and everybody's leaving. To Central, to Santa Cruz. So I think that's another solution, for people to be, I think, moving around and thinking about consolidation, because the cost just gets burdened, because we become, even for the city manager's job, we become a training ground, in our city, in not only fire district, but police and city manager. So that's one of the things that I think it gets missed. So thank you.
Thanks very much for that.
We got one more.
Oh, we got one more. Commissioner Anderson.
Well, I'm just going to say to Joe's comment, when we started, I was part of the consolidation group for Aptos, La Silva, and Central. And we had quite a few stakeholders in our first couple meetings. And after the first couple meetings, people were seeing the grandeur of this thing and decided that they wanted to leave the group. So it worked out fine.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comment. Yeah, there is a lot of trepidation anytime you get into these, because you don't want to lose what you had at risk of something great. And I think this organization has proved that it can be better than it was individually when you're together. And maybe not everybody in the organization shares that. But I would say for the constituents, the people that actually matter, like, it's an improvement from what it was before. And to your point, Mr. Direct Commissioner Anderson, it hasn't always been easy. If I told you guys how long we spent trying to come up with the name, like, you guys would be knocked out of your socks, and the different names, but whatever, like, it hasn't always been easy. But it is a virtuous ending for this organization, and very much appreciate LAFCO's staff as well as the commissioners for helping us get to the point where we are. We very much appreciate it.
Okay, this will be my last time, but thank you very much for the presentation.
Thanks, Chief. Really appreciate it.
This was an information item. There's no action to be taken. So we'll move on to the next, which is other business, and I'll ask staff for a presentation on educational workshops.
Thank you, Chair. My presentation will be brief. This commission hosted educational workshops about two years ago, and they were very successful. They were well received. Those workshops focused on providing more information to special districts, specifically board members and staff. We co-hosted 3 virtual workshops with CSDA in 2021, 2022. As I mentioned, we focused on helping districts and board members learn more about the Brown Act, the Public Records Request Act, and just how to be more efficient internally. But more importantly, that was a way for LAFCO to build a stronger working relationship with the special districts and also build trust. And that's something that I mentioned at our previous agenda item is that in my 16 years, I'm like, that's the key factor in changes of organization is the agencies trusting LAFCO, that we're not here to go after them. We're here because we want them to succeed. So that was very successful. In the last couple of months, we've heard from the commission and members of the public of, a need for water workshops. And so what staff is requesting the commission to give us direction is to start working on developing 2 additional workshops that focus on water and the road CSA. So what I'm proposing to the commission is hosting workshops for the private water systems. We all know what's going on with Big Basin Water and that whole situation, but it's not the only small water system that's struggling in the county or around the state. And so just Big Basin Water is just getting all the attention right now. So staff believes that it would benefit us to host a workshop for the private water systems to educate them on recent laws, to ensure that they're in compliance with rules and regulations, but also just build a better relationship with them, because I think that that's something that is missing between these small water systems and LAFCO, is building that connection. Again, LAFCO does not have purview over private water systems, but there may be situations where these private water systems may need to be annexed into a neighboring water district, and it helps when those residents or representatives know who LAFCO is, because then LAFCO is just this obscure agency that no one's ever heard of. If we build that relationship, then they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm hearing it from Joe or Chair Hunt. That's what one of the benefits of this workshop. And there's a lot of small water systems in the county, and so I feel like it would be difficult to host one workshop at one central location and invite all the water systems to attend. That we're going to get a low turnout, and that's one of the reasons why I believe the county and the regional water group has not hosted the Connecting the Drops forum in a couple of years, is because of the low turnout and the costs associated to hosting that type of event. So as part of this effort, staff wants to create a workshop, but then present that workshop to the small water systems, go to their location. So I'm thinking of breaking down the county into 5 segments. And that way we can focus on clusters of the small water systems and go to them. So go to Davenport and host this workshop and provide that information, or go to the Corlitos area and provide information. Same information, but going to them, I think that will be a higher increase of success. Same model for the road CSAs. We have 34 of them, and some of them are doing better than others. A lot of people are not aware of what they can and cannot do. I think this is an opportunity for LAFCO to facilitate and improve communications between the county and these road CSAs, and LAFCO can provide assistance on making sure that they're more efficient, and they can have they can be more transparent, and again, building that trust with the road CSAs. I think it's timely for these private water systems and for the road CSAs for LAFCO to play a more proactive role. So for today, staff is just requesting that the commission give directions to start working on developing an outline of these workshops, present the commission proposed costs, dates and times. And so it will be a follow-up assignment for staff to bring back to the commission saying, here's what we developed, here's how much we anticipate the cost is going to be, here's who we think should be the guest speakers for these workshops, and they get further direction from the commission. But for now, staff is just recommending that you give direction to staff to start working on developing the outlines of these 2 workshops. And with that, Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the public?
Becky Steinbrenner, thank you, Mr. Serrano, for presenting these ideas. I appreciate it very much. I fall in both categories, actually, where I live. I'm a customer of a small privately owned water company in the hills, and I'm also part of County Service Area 33, road maintenance. By the way, our road is in a lot better shape than county's roads. But I really support these public meetings. It is actually in LAFCO's bylaws that LAFCO sponsor a water symposium or educational event of some sort. I believe it's every 2 years. I've written your commission about that. It's in past correspondence. This has not been done since 2018. I attended that one. I attended the one before. They were very well attended. What I want to say is that the first one that I went to that was sponsored by LAFCO was a panel, and it had some excellent speakers. It was a presentation. It was much more effective than the second one I attended, which was an open house forum. Those are a mess because you don't get to hear what anybody says. They're off in small groups here and there, and it becomes a social event more than an educational event. So I want to ask that whatever you do, it is not an open house format, because I don't think they're effective in allowing people who are attending to be able to hear both the questions and the answers that are presented in the various parts of the very noisy room. I also feel that it is timely because of what is happening in the Big Basin, and also because it is the state's intention to consolidate small water systems. It is a stated intention to do that.
1 minute
And
left.
one more minute, thank you. So it is timely. It is something that Ms. Sierra Ryan from County Environmental Water Resources has also said that we need to look at what's happened at Big Basin and why, and help small water company owners and customers not get to that point of desperation that Chief Nee talked about. In terms of the road maintenance, that is also very good because we need to have updated information for everyone to hear. Bringing in the paving contractors, their problems with working with small county service area road maintenance, and also the county's changes to the bidding process. That has been a huge improvement actually, but could use more because the cost of paving has gone sky high, and but the levels of having to go out for 3 bids has not. So I look forward to this. I think it should not be scattered out. I think it should be maybe 2 in different areas of the county, or if not 1, because people will come. These were very well attended in the water symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becky.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anything online?
No, sir.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Cummings.
Yeah, thanks for that update. Very supportive of the direction you're going. And I also agree with Ms. Steinbrenner's comments around the open house forums versus the panels. They tend to be much more, it's a lot easier to hear the different questions that are being raised and hearing the feedback versus having the kind of everybody goes to a table and puts sticky notes up kind of approach. I do have a question. I'm just going to put it out there because I think I know the answer, but I'm just wondering how different the workshops would be depending on the areas you're going to go to. And yeah, I'll just start with that question. I have a comment maybe after.
Yeah, so it would be the same structure, so same information, but the only difference is we'll be going to different parts of the county. That way we have a higher turnout. And then we can have, what I'm also envisioning, and maybe having someone from that particular area, like a representative of that water system, be part of the panel. That way they know, oh, that's Maria or that's Jeff. Like, okay, he's part of this workshop. So maybe we'll, again, a better turnout. I'm not married to that structure. I just think that in the past, we've seen, or the reasons why I've heard from the county of why the Connecting the Drops Forum has not been hosted is because of low turnout. And it's very difficult to have someone from Davenport go to Watsonville if we decide to host it there. So I'm just trying to see what's a better way. And this is a different approach. The same information, we're just taking the show on the road. That's the approach that I'm thinking.
And I think that's a good approach as well. I guess the one thing I would add, if the workshops are going to be pretty similar, if it's possible, maybe putting some slides together and recording, the information so that if people can't get there, then we can have it online for people to access that's on YouTube or something, but having some kind of video that we can direct people to as well if they want to learn more, I think would also be helpful.
That'll be great. So that's something that staff will consider when we find a location or a venue that they have IT capabilities. So we can do record. So that can be living on this commission's YouTube channel or on our website or both. So good idea.
I'd like to ask about partners for such an event, the county certainly, but also the groundwater sustainability agencies. How do you,
So
what are you
that's
looking at there?
So you hit it on the head. So we're thinking about who could be great partners. We're thinking about the State Water Board, CSDA, CSAC. We're trying to kind of expand. This is a multi kind of benefit is building relationships not only with these affected organizations, but also these statewide organizations. So we're exploring all possible partnerships to see who would be best fit to present information to these residents and representatives. So yeah, we're open to it. And that's why staff is asking the commission to give us direction, because in that way we can start exploring and presenting all this information to the commission. And then you can give us direction of, we should really focus on the State Water Board or some other organization that we didn't think of. So that we want to do the work, but before we put effort into it, we want to make sure that the commission has supports this idea.
Thank you. Commissioner Cummings. And then Anderson.
If there's, I guess we can comment, or I'm happy to move the recommended action.
Okay, I just wanted to see if Commissioner Anderson, do you have?
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of things. I think it's a good idea to have these sessions. Obviously, the content is really important.
Mhm.
And there's also the question whether we can get speakers for all 5 of them. And that becomes quite a burden on individuals.
Right.
So we'll definitely have to put thought into things of interest for the different areas and people that are willing to participate.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to do is to suggest that we also have, after this conclusion of these, let's say 2 to 5 sessions, that we have a study session at LAFCO itself. We've done that in the past about land use and water, soil, and I think it'd be useful to look at that as well.
Great.
I certainly will try to attend as many of these, at least remotely. I really suggest we do a hybrid meeting so people can tune in on their computers to see what's going on and hear, and if necessary, or they want to be able to participate.
Great idea. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to move the recommended actions by seconded by Commissioner Jim Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next up is CSA 48 reorganization. Request a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Again, another, hopefully a brief presentation. The commission requested that we bring this back for additional discussions. The intent was to provide a draft outline of the transition plan or reorganization plan. But what's important about that outline is that we get comments and feedback from not only CAL FIRE, from the county. We want to make sure that this is a collective joint effort. So we need a little bit more time to gather their comments and edit that outline. So that's why it's not being presented today. So we're hoping to present it to the commission in October. That being said, a lot has happened since our last discussion. It's my understanding that the county has discontinued FDAC, the Fire Department Advisory Commission. That has now been evolved into a Fire Department Advisory Group. Excuse me. So again, there's been already some internal discussions about the future of CSA 48, and so that structure has changed. Your staff has been coordinating with county staff to again work on the transition plan, but also it's my understanding that they are planning to present the county master plan to the Board of Supervisors sometime this month. I believe it's in late September on the 24th, if I'm not mistaken. But also they'll discuss a similar recommendation that we presented to the commission in our last meeting, which is to work together on this reorganization effort. So that's ongoing as well. with that, Chair, I really wanted to just answer any questions that the commission had. This is going to be an ongoing discussion. Again, we're going to present the reorganization plan outline in October. We're hoping that in September 24th, the Board of Supervisors will give clear direction to their staff to continue working with LAFCO on this reorganization effort. And we'll see what the discussion is with the master plan. But again, we're moving forward. But the key thing is that we move forward as strategic partners with the county and CAL FIRE on this effort, because this is only going to work if we just have a seat at the table throughout the whole process. So that's the approach. And Chair, I'll defer back to you and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the public?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. I have great interest in this. And I was quite disturbed that the County Board of Supervisors voted to dissolve the Fire Department Advisory Commission before hearing about this proposed consolidation effort. I made them aware of it in correspondence and in oral testimony before they took the action, but they went ahead and did it. It is unclear what this advisory group would be, how soon they would be convened. It was disclosed that it will be department heads that will select them. That, in this case, could be either Mr. Michael Beaton, who's in the audience, and I hope you ask him some questions, from General Services, or the County Administrative Office. I'm concerned because I don't know what the constitution of that advisory group would be. I don't know how soon they could come into collection. They still have to work out their bylaws, which are apparently going to be presented to the Board of Supervisors soon. But as a member of the public, it seems like the liaison communication effort for transparency that Chief Nee talked with you about as being so important in an effort like this is dissolving. Now, I attend the FDAC meetings whenever I can, and I've seen there have been problems. So I have spoken with some of the FDAC commissioners, and they see this as an opportunity for a positive change. But what's unclear is what will that change be, and how will this improve the service to the public, not only in the governance,
1 minute left.
thank you, but also in the service itself, which Chief Nee has told you is paramount. So I look forward to the presentation of this issue to the Board of Supervisors. They have not heard it yet. It has not been publicly presented to the Board of Supervisors. And I look forward to their responses to that. I would hope there would be some town hall meetings to involve the public and the fire agencies involved, because as we've heard, it's a culture melding as well as many other factors, and getting everybody on board and feeling heard as soon as possible is important. So I look forward to the Board of Supervisors meeting and learning more about this advisory group. And I hope that you will invite Mr. Beaton to come up and talk with you, and perhaps Chief Wilson from CAL FIRE as our County Fire Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becky.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments in the room, online?
No, Chair, no requests.
Questions or comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, I have a question about your table number A. And it's confusing to me about what it means, like some explanation about, what it is. The other thing which is curious about it is if you look at the per parcel cost of these different agencies, there's a big range from $57 to about $2,300.
Right. And
so I assume this has something to do with the area that's in the sphere outside of the area of service, but There's still like some better explanation of it.
Good question, Commissioner. So this was extracted from the AP Triton study. So this table shows the hypothetical revenue available for areas within a fire agency's sphere. So, for example, we're just for reference, I'm looking at Felton Fire. They have 13 parcels within their sphere. So what AP Triton has done is they looked at the revenue stream within those 13 parcels, and they determined that the total revenue, if the Felton Fire were to annex those 13 parcels, would be around $1,900 total. So the question is that it's not a significant revenue. It's not a cash cow for Felton to annex these 13 parcels. They're only going to get 1,900 hypothetically. But what the intent of this table shows is it doesn't really impact Felton Fire that much. But if we look at all the fire agencies and their collective hypothetical revenue stream, that it amounts to $3 million. So if hypothetically all the fire agencies decided we want to annex everything in their sphere, that means CSA 48 will lose $3 million. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't been able to do any annexations with this fire agency spheres, is because CSA 48 functions as a funding mechanism. So it's difficult for the county to provide services when they're going to potentially lose revenue. So that's the intent of this report. I mean, this table is to show what the hypothetical revenue stream would be if an agency were to annex the parcels within their sphere. And that's what the table was trying to illustrate.
It depends on the degree of development,
Exactly. So exactly. So it's based on the values of those parcels and how those different assessments are calculated. And that's what AP Triton was able to gather from their analysis of the county's data.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Jim Anderson?
Well, since you picked on Felton, and I'm familiar with that a little bit. So the fees associated with that, we have the deposit that Felton would put down is $8,000. And you and I have discussed that it's probably turned out to be about a $4,000 fee to do that. And I know in talking to some of my other fire chiefs and stuff, quite a few years ago when we were talking about this, was the associated fees for the income that they would get from annexing that. Is there any discussion about the waiving of fees or discounting of fees or anything like that? Because I think that would help in some cases to facilitate it. So for $4,000, we're getting 18, it would become profitable in a couple of years.
Right. Right. And this is something that the commission definitely has the authority to consider for any application that we receive, to either waive or reduce the LAFCO fees associated to an annexation or any change of organization. This commission has considered that in recent years. So that's definitely an option for the commission if any agencies were to come in requesting an annexation or any change.
Okay, thank you.
There are no other comments. I'll entertain a motion to continue directing staff to work on this.
I have a couple comments real quick. I did just want to highlight that the board action to dissolve FDAC actually was a recommendation that came from FDAC, and they've been having these conversations over some time. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. But I did want to invite up Michael Beaton from GSD just to ask if you could answer the question around when the advisory group would be convened. I know, the bylaws are going to be coming back to the county, but to the board. I'm just wondering if you can answer that question real quick.
Thank you, LAFCO. Chair, Michael Beaton, Director of General Services, also Cal Fire Contract or County Fire Contract Administrator. So you're correct. The Fire Department Advisory Commission has not been fully sunset. We are planning on meeting in 2 weeks with the Fire Department Advisory Commission. On that agenda will be the development of the departmental advisory group and how it would actually function. We are also bringing to the Board of Supervisors on September 24th the Fire Department master plan. In there's a lot of different avenues that require work. Each avenue might be require a special set of skills. So we are looking at a departmental advisory group that are going to have specialties in the different areas that we need to focus on as part of the County Fire Master Plan. For example, one of the areas in the master plan is to explore the governance of county fire. I would prefer a advisory group that would help, would potentially consist of Chief Nee and others that have actually gone through a type of consolidation of what the impact may be. So we are looking for, I'm looking for a departmental advisory group that's going to be a little bit fluid, depending on the initiative that we're going to be focused on for county fire. But again, this is on the agenda for, or this will be on the agenda for the Fire Department Advisory Commission, their last commission meeting, to really help develop what our bylaws might be for that commission and then how we would actually proceed. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I can move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Commissioner Cummings,
I'll second it.
seconded by Commissioner Jim Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. And the last of our
Business
other
item.
business items is extraterritorial service agreement status update.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully another brief presentation. This is something that your staff has bringing up on a 2-year basis, is just providing an update to the commission on how many ESAs we have in the county. At present, we have 49 ESAs. Most of them were established in the late 90s, early 2000s. In recent years, we've approved around 8 ESAs. The difference between the ones that we approved in the last couple of years is we include the adoption of a resolution. The ESA gets recorded and also has conditions of when annexations may occur in the future. For example, the one with Watsonville, that ESA has a condition that the annexation must occur once the development has been completed. It's my understanding that Mid-Penn Housing is at the process of finishing that. So we are anticipating an application from Mid-Penn in the near future to annex and discontinue that ESA. But again, this is an informational item. Just wanted to provide the commission an update on all the ESAs that we have. As you can see, most of our ESAs active in the county are water related. And a lot of these ESAs cannot be annexed because they're way outside the affected agency's jurisdictional boundaries. So annexation is not practical. But again, the most recent ESAs, we have included language to consider annexation in the near future, and we anticipate receiving one from Watsonville and also one from the county for CSA 7. This commission approved that ESA I believe like 2 months ago. We anticipate getting an application later this year. So again, the intent for ESAs is to provide services when they cannot be annexed, but your staff has interpreted as this should be a temporary solution, a stepping stone for annexation. So that's something that we will continue practicing. But again, this is an informational item, Chair. No action is required, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the public? Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Anderson.
Would that Wattsville ESA be Atkinson Lane by chance?
Is it Atkinson, Pippin Lane, or?
Pippin, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Roger Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just curious whether there are any of these that have not been really taken over the last several years. In other words, was the authorization given, but it hasn't been used?
Great question. So that's when we did a thorough evaluation of the ESAs 2 years ago. We did ask that question. So we coordinated with all the affected agencies and asked, are these active? And yes, the 49 ESAs, they're connected to their respective agency.
So they have service.
So they are receiving services, yes.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to written correspondence and I'll entertain a staff report.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief, but we're in interesting times with LAFCO. LAFCO is our statewide association. They advocate for legislative changes, and one of their key components is a legislative committee that would present LAFCO related bills that we would like to support, and that would then be presented to the LAFCO board directors for action. Cal LAFCO decided to discontinue that committee and create a new model, allowing the 4 regional officers, and I'm the regional officer for the coastal region, to be the ones that determined which legislative bills should be supported by Cal LAFCO. So that's a responsibility that the regional officers were not aware of. And more concerning is a lot of LAFCOs were not aware of the intent to dissolve this committee. So there's been a lot of pushback from several LAFCOs around the state. As a regional officer for the coastal region, I did do a survey to the 13 or so LAFCOs in our region, and 90% of them heard about this but didn't know the details. 2 of them didn't even know that it was happening. So that's very alarming. Cal LAFCO has always been about transparency, so the fact that a lot of LAFCOs weren't aware of this, it was concerning. So what does that mean for us? Well, your staff has been working with other LAFCOs to encourage Cal LAFCO to bring this back for discussion and determine, does the majority of LAFCO support discontinuing this committee and going with this new model? And if not, maybe we should reconsider or do a transition period. So for that time being, we're kind of in a gray area with overseeing legislation and legislative bills. But I wanted to bring this to the attention to the commission, because your staff did sign a joint letter that was sent to Cal LAFCO, encouraging them to let's reevaluate this and let's take another look and have further discussions before we allow this process to unfold even further. So that's one thing. The other thing is I wanted to let the commission know that as of this morning, SB 1209 is at the governor's desk. So he has 30 days to sign it. SB 1209 will officially allow LAFCOs to require identification agreements as part of the application requirements. So that has been a practice for all LAFCOs since I was aware of. But a couple of years ago, San Luis Obispo LAFCO was sued by an applicant challenging the requirement of identification agreement. That court ruling went against that LAFCO. So that really raised some concerns from other LAFCOs, because most of us have a policy requiring that as a document needed. So Cal LAFCO coordinated with Senator Cortese, who's the author of this bill. It was supported by the majority of LAFCOs and other statewide organizations. It was passed. It went through the whole legislative process. It is now on the governor's desk. Your staff, this commission did not take an official position on this bill, but your staff did send a letter of support a few weeks ago, and I just wanted to bring that to the commission's attention. And again, as of this morning, it's on the governor's desk, and we're hoping that gets signed. That way, we have no discrepancies or issues when it comes to requiring identification agreements. And Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from the public about Cal LAFCO? Anything from the commissioners? Commissioner Roger Anderson?
Yeah, a couple of things on the legislative actions of Cal LAFCO. If I recall, we have our organization requires that we have to spend 85% of our money on educational things. And will this be now basically counted as lobbying? Is that going to what it's going to be?
Yeah, that's kind of we're unsure of what's the impact. My understanding is Cal LAFCO staff, which just has two people, the executive director and admin. They're spending a lot of time on legislation, but they're not a lobbyist. So they were hoping to change the current structure. But that type of question of how does that impact the trickle effect? So we just don't know yet. So that we want further discussion.
It'd be very sad if we're put in any way on that organization in jeopardy because of this.
Right.
So the other thing that I'm curious about is, do you have anything more to report about the UCFC lawsuit?
Yeah, so good question. As the commission is aware, we as part of one of the articles that we included in this agenda packet is that the appeals court did rule against the university. As you know, the university challenged the city that they don't need to go through the LAFCO process. You know, they have an existing contract with the city. So they don't need to get approval to receive services outside the city limits to the campus that's located outside the city of Santa Cruz. That ruling went against the university. The university appealed, and just recently, the appeals court again ruled against the university. And again, this is a decision that mirrors what happened like 10 years ago. We went through the same ruling and appeals, and we got the same results. So we went through the same practice again, 10 years later, and we got the same results. That being said, a lot has changed. I think Francisco and I have been doing our part to build a better relationship with the university. Francisco has a really good connection with the university, so that has been very helpful. And I think now the university doesn't see LAFCO as another obstacle for them. So I think they're open to having discussions with us. And if there's a way for LAFCO to be a facilitator between the city, the county, and the university to find a solution that makes sense, maybe through an ESA or an annexation, that's something that LAFCO is willing to play a role if invited. But in the meantime, our next step is to have another meeting with the university representatives and see, all right, now that we've got the ruling, what's next? How can we help? So that's something that's on our table. And I'm Francisco, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did reach out to the university, so we're hoping to schedule a meeting soon. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Press articles. Anything in the news you'd like to?
Other than we just talked about the university, there's no other items to discuss. So this is an informational item. No commission action is required.
Right, commissioner's business. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Hearing none, we'll move to adjournment. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, commissioners.